Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. Today I will be breaking down my top tips for making your hardcore Ironman as safe as possible. Before I start, I'd like to make it known that I do not consider myself to be an elite hardcore Ironman, but I still feel that I've played the game mode long enough to have a solid amount of experience, and having died on my first account already, I really know the sting of losing your status. Now, while dying on my first account was really painful and demotivating at first, in the long run it did help me develop better and, more importantly, safer methods for playing my new hardcore, and I thought that I would share some of these methods by putting them into a video. Anyways, I hope you find some of these tips useful and enlightening, so let's begin. Tip number 1. Adopt the hardcore Ironman playstyle. Now, this is a very broad statement that can honestly use to summarize the bulk of the tips in this video, but I still thought that it might be worth mentioning it separately. Basically, in my opinion, in order to greaten your likelihood of success on your hardcore Ironman, you need to play in a sort of focused, vigilant style, which isn't a way of playing that most of us are really used to. Typically, RuneScape is played in a very leisurely, casual, and laid-back sort of way that doesn't require vast amounts of focus or concentration. I mean, this sort of speaks for itself. Now, I'm not saying that nothing on RuneScape requires focus. Just take bossing or PKing, for example. All I'm saying is that in general, RuneScape is a game that is actively played semi-AFK, whether you're multitasking multiple accounts, watching something on another browser, or just doing homework. These sorts of play habits, in my eyes, are quite dangerous for certain aspects when playing a hardcore Ironman, so I recommend trying to break some of these habits and attempt to conform to a style that's better suited for your hardcore account. In a common, casual playstyle that most of us are used to, casually dying on something like a Slayer task because you weren't paying attention is no big deal. Sure, it's a slight inconvenience, but you can just run back and pick up all your stuff and there's no real consequence. My point is that this playstyle makes it quite easy to make these sorts of mistakes, and the consequences of making those mistakes aren't severe enough for people to change their habits. Take Zora as another example. The fact that players are able to reclaim items for free after dying allows them to farm it without worry of suffering greater consequences from dying. If this were changed and there was a sterner consequence for dying, such as perhaps maybe a fee for reclaiming lost items, then people would be a lot more careful when fighting the boss, putting a lot more focus into what they are doing. Compare the consequence of my Zora scenario to your hardcore status. Obviously, both are bad, but losing the status is a greater punishment than a fee to collect lost items, so treat this accordingly. Is it really worth taking a high risk for only a moderate reward? Is a slight chance of a rare clue scroll reward really worth entering the wilderness and jeopardizing the countless hours that you put into your account? You can be the judge of your own risks, but I would still highly recommend you play your account as safe as you can by avoiding playing too casual and putting thought into the methods that you can use to increase your account's safety. And I'll be going over a few of these methods in the next tips. Moving on. Tip number 2. Simply wear a Ring of Life. A Ring of Life is an enchanted diamond ring that will automatically teleport you to safety if your hit points falls below 10%. This means that someone with 10 HP would be teleported at 1 hit point, someone with 50 HP would be teleported at 5 or fewer, and so on. Now, a lot of players already know that wearing a Ring of Life is a good safety precaution when engaging in a reasonably dangerous situation like bossing or questing, but I would actually recommend wearing it in all situations, even seemingly non-dangerous ones. Continuously wearing a Ring of Life is a very good habit to get into on your hardcore Ironman, as you never know when it could save you from a disconnection. Because of this, I would value a Ring of Life over all other rings, excluding a few exclusive situations such as a safe AFKable combat training method, such as Nightmare Zone, where instead you could wear maybe a Berserker ring. One other thing I would like to mention about the Ring of Life is that it is actually very easy to obtain even on a low-level account. Besides making them at level 43 crafting and 57 magic, you can actually get one for free as a reward from the Lost Tribe quest, which actually has low requirements and can be completed quite early on. Just make sure that you get yourself a good light source. Another way of obtaining them is by catching Magpie Implings with 65 Hunter. I highly recommend you prioritize getting yourself a Ring of Life as quickly as you can, because you never know when you may need it. If you DC in a dangerous situation without a Ring of Life, you are almost guaranteed to die, but if you do have one equipped, you at least have a decent chance of survival. Now, when I DC'd, mine didn't actually save me, I'm afraid, and it was really depressing to see the Ring of Life in my loot pile after running back to the spot where I died. But hopefully if you're in a similar situation, you will fare far better than I did. Tip number 3. Use protection prayers at all times during dangerous combat. It may seem like a waste of prayer, and that's because it probably is in a lot of cases, but in the long run, it could very well save your status. You are almost certain to DC on the journey to a high Slayer level, so the only way to really ensure your safety is to leave protection prayers on during high level Slayer. Prayer flicking seems extremely tempting, but this won't help you in the event of a DC, so I don't recommend it if you really want to maximize your safety. I've said this before and I'll say it again, why take avoidable risks after investing so much time into your account? This idea can pretty much help justify every single tip in this video. I regret not keeping mine on when I was doing Slayer on my first hardcore, as this is exactly how I died. I used Protect Melee for about 90% of my Fire Giant Slayer task, and it wasn't until I took it off for a very small portion of the task that I actually DC'd and my Ring of Life didn't save me. I took my prayer off because I thought that I would be safe in the southern portion of the room, as this area has far less Fire Giant spawns, but obviously I was wrong, and this is a great example on why it's never a bad idea to be overly cautious. Tip number 4. Get the dangerous stuff done first. One risky strategy that I've seen a lot of fellow hardcore Ironmen try is grinding non-dangerous skills before actually buckling down on training their combat, which to me isn't the safest approach to starting your account. I already mentioned how the argument why take avoidable risks can help justify every part of this guide, but it could not be more relevant than it is to this specific tip. Why spend weeks grinding non-dangerous skills at the beginning stage of your account only to risk all your work once you start doing more dangerous activities? If you look at my account right now, you will see that none of my levels are significantly high, and that is because I am working on raising my combat first before I start grinding other skills. As you can see, my firemaking is only leveled 85, not 99. If I had gotten 99, then I would have had needed to spend around 1 extra week there, and had I died during the early quest and combat grind right after, that extra week would have been a complete waste of time. To avoid this sort of scenario, I recommend focusing on questing and combat before going for any high-level skills. I would specifically recommend getting hit points, defense, 43 prayer, and adequate defense gear to ensure that you get your account to a fairly safe status before beginning other activities. Some goals that I would advise getting out of the way early on are certain quest bosses, wilderness activities such as getting a god cloak, protection prayers, and prayer potions. Tip number 5. Play with your game sounds on. To enable this, make sure that you have the sound effects volume turned on, which is the middle setting in the volume menu. Don't worry as much about area sound volume, as this is far less important and will get annoying after a while. The reason this is important is it allows you to actually hear when your character is being damaged. This could be super helpful if you aren't paying full attention to your character, as the sound effect will alert you to any potential danger. One example of when this feature is very important is Wintertod. Since there are so many players within the same area, it can be extremely difficult to keep track of your health bar just by looking at the cluster of countless other HP bars of all the other players. This is why having your game sounds enabled can help alert you to when the Wintertod is damaging your character. Without sound, it can be very easy to let your guard down and die due to not knowing that your character is taking damage. This has personally happened to me multiple times on my non-Iron account, and I'm sure that countless hardcore Ironmen have died in similar ways as well. Also keep in mind that there are lots of other situations that having sounds may benefit you. So as a good habit, I recommend leaving the sounds on at all times when playing your hardcore Ironman. Tip number 6. Speaking of good habits, make sure that you log out instead of going AFK when you leave your computer. It would be pretty embarrassing if you lost your status due to going AFK and dying to a monster, so eliminate this possibility by simply getting into the habit of logging out instead. Logging back in only takes a few seconds, so there really isn't much of an excuse of not doing this. Even if you're almost sure that going AFK in a certain area is safe, you would probably be surprised at the strange ways players have died from leaving their account logged in. Surely going AFK by a farm patch is safe, right? Wrong. Some NPCs have a ridiculously long wandering range, and all it takes is one devious player to find a way to lure them towards you. Just take a look at this map showing all the areas that hardcore Ironmen have died. If you take a look around, you can see some very strange areas that players have lost their status, and even quite a few at that farming patch example that I just showed. Another similar situation is the Tazars in the Karamaja volcano. Many players consider them safe due to the fact that they are non-aggressive, yet they can easily be lured by another player away from any safe spot. All you need to do is attack someone's Tazar, lure it away, and then hide so the original AFK player automatically draws the Tazar's attention back to them, ultimately causing a deathmatch between the AFK player and the Tazar. Anyways, these are just a couple examples of the strange ways that you can potentially die in seemingly safe situations, so remember to carefully think ahead when leaving your hardcore Ironman AFK. Tip number 7. Always be prepared by keeping a teleport on your character at all times. Always having an emergency teleport on your character is a very wise idea and is yet another good habit to get into when playing your hardcore Ironman. Two great teleports that are easy to obtain at a low level are the Ectophile from the Ghost Ahoy quest and the Ardoon Cloak 1 after completing the Easy Ardoon Achievement Diary. The Ectophile is a one-click teleport, which means that it is slightly faster than other teleports, so it works great while doing more dangerous combat or quests. For skilling and other less dangerous activities, the Ardoon Cloak 1 is slightly better because you can equip it and save an inventory space. Once you progress further into the game, you will likely encounter more monsters that inflict poison, such as Zulrah. For these activities, the best possible teleport would probably have to be a basic house tab, as being in your house prevents you from dying to poison. If you use another teleport and find yourself out of immediate danger but still poisoned, you could still potentially die due to not being able to access food from your bank in time. So for this reason, house tabs are probably the safest teleport you can use. Anyways, that is going to conclude my general top tips for playing your hardcore Ironman. I know that some of the advice in this video may seem a little bit unnecessary to certain people, but just remember that in order to truly improve your success as a hardcore Ironman, you really need to try and go the extra mile to stay alive. Remember that hardcore Ironman is a separate game mode as opposed to regular Ironman, so if you plan on keeping your status, make sure that you treat it so. I really hope that you can use some of this information to benefit your account, and seeing as this is my first guide, any form of feedback is very welcomed. So, thanks a lot for watching, and take care.